Good morning everyone, Vincent Teo from HDTV Test here. It's another hot, beautiful day in Manchester, has been so for the past few days. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the British summer we've all been waiting for. I'm gonna hit town and enjoy the sunshine later on, but before that, I want to tell you guys about this scorching hot television from Sony, the Bravia XE94 or the X940E as it is known in the USA, which I think is going to be the best 2017 LED LCD in terms of picture quality. Intro. My name is Vincent Teo and I'm a TV reviewer and professional calibrator, and this is the Sony XE95 XE9405. Man, that's a mouthful. It only comes in one memo screen size of 75 inches and costs £5,000 at the time I filmed this video in June 2017, which rules it out for many people. But if you have the space and the budget, then no other TV except Sony's own flagship ZD9 or Z9D in the USA can beat it for sheer HDR impact. The most important ingredient that makes this TV so good is Full Array Local Dimming or FALD backlight technology. In case you don't already know, Full Array Local Dimming is widely considered to be the pinnacle of LED LCD display technology. What it does is to divide the screen into different segments or zones, and each zone can be dimmed independently from other zones. As you can imagine, this allows darker portion of the image to maintain their blacks even though there are brighter elements at other parts of the screen. But not all local dimming systems are the same. It all depends on the number of zones and the effectiveness of the local dimming algorithm. Here's a true story. Years ago, Toshiba, this was before the Japanese company licensed its brand name to Vestel, was briefing journalists, including myself, about a new LED LCD television. And in the presentation, Toshiba specifically said that the TV has full array local dimming. When I eventually received the TV for review, I tested that there's only frame dimming, in that the entire screen will dim down or light up, not in separate zones. At that time, I thought to myself, maybe a one-zone local dimming also qualifies as full array local dimming. Now, the Sony XE94 has many more individually dimmable zones, using our self-authored test pattern consisting a small white box crawling horizontally and then vertically along the edges of a black background. I counted roughly 16 vertical columns and 16 horizontal rows, giving us a total of 256 zones. To put this number into perspective, only the Sony ZD9, the Panasonic DX902 and the Toshiba ZL1 have higher numbers of zones among LED LCD televisions. The Sony ZD9 has 648 zones, the Panasonic DX902 and the Toshiba ZL1 each has 512 zones. Last year's Sony XE94 only had 96 zones, so the Bravia XE94 or X940E is a significant improvement in this respect. It's one thing having a high number of zones, it's another to use them effectively, and fortunately Sony has some of the best local dimming algorithm in the business, even from the days of the W905A, which in my opinion is still the best Full HD 1080p LCD TV of all time. Coming back to this Sony XE94, its local dimming algorithm is so effective at minimizing blooming and haloing artifacts. It made it very tricky for us to do a zone count because it's difficult to work out where one zone ended and another zone began. Even in highly challenging HDR scenes, such as this logo of a white bird against a black background in the opening credits of The Martian, the Sony XE94 displayed remarkably little blooming as long as you sit straight onto the television. Peak brightness reached 1285 nits on a 10% window. Again, one of the highest we've measured so far. Off the top of my head, only the Sony ZD9, the Sony XE93, the Samsung KS9500 or the KS9800 as it is called in the USA, and the Samsung Q9 can boast a higher peak brightness. And because of its inherent higher light output and different tone mapping algorithm, the Sony XE94 successfully resolved most specular highlight detail in 4K Blu-ray movies that are mastered to 4000 nits, such as Pan or Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Needless to say, HDR looked spectacular on the Sony XE94. During this storm scene in Mad Max Fury Road, the lightning and the explosions just look so impactful and realistic. Because of the integrated X1 Extreme processor, the upscaling quality on the Sony XE94 or X940E, this applies to the Sony ZD9, XE93 and A1 OLED too, is the best I've seen on a consumer television to date. One question that I'm always asked is whether to let your 4K Blu-ray player or the Sony TV do the upscaling. Well, I've compared back and forth on an Oppo 203 with an SMPTE RP133 test pattern with 576i resolution. If you set the Oppo's resolution to Source Direct, the TV will be doing the upscaling. But if you set the resolution to Auto, the player will be doing the upscaling. In my opinion, the result is marginally cleaner and sharper if the upscaling was done by the Sony XE94. It's very close, but if it was me, I'll be setting Source Direct on my Oppo 203 and let any TV with a Sony X1 Extreme chipset do the upscaling. Like all LED LCDs, the Sony XE94 is a sample and hold display. You can get 1080 lines of motion resolution on the TV, but only if backlight scanning is activated by setting motion flow to either clear or custom. There's a slight drop in light output with backlight scanning, but this TV offers more than enough light output to compensate. If you want pure BFI or black frame insertion, you can set clearness to max in the motion flow custom sub-menu. I have to warn you though that this is similar to the impulse mode on older Sony Bravias. There's flicker with 24Hz content, although less so with 60 frames per second material. Also, with BFI enabled, the highest light output I could extract from the XE94 was only 100 nits on a windowed pattern and 43 nits full fill, which will be too dim for most people. The XE94 uses a VA-type LCD panel, probably from this Taiwanese vendor called AUO. The panel has a slow response time, and so dark objects traveling across a light background can leave a trail. I usually refer to this as dark trailing or black smearing. While this doesn't sound very good, all VA LCD panels suffer from this to a certain degree, and the dark trailing on the Sony XE94 wasn't as pronounced as last year's XD94 or the Panasonic DX902. Also, whether you see it or not depends on your individual sensitivity and the type of video material you watch. For the record, I've watched tons of fast action sports, football, tennis on this TV, and I've not been bothered by this issue at all. Just like other Sony TVs with X1 Extreme processor, the Sony XE94 gives different input lag results depending on whether the incoming video signal is 4K or not. If you send the TV a 4K signal with game mode on, the input lag will be 25 milliseconds regardless of whether it's in SDR or HDR. But if you send a 1080p signal, the input lag will increase by around 1 frame to 43 milliseconds, which in my opinion is still playable. Looking beyond gaming responsiveness, the Sony XE94 or X940E offers a couple of very nice features for playing video games. First is smooth gradation, which can reduce in-game posterization. The other is black frame insertion, which can improve motion clarity as long as you can put up with the 60Hz flicker and darker picture. Engaging black frame insertion or BFI increased latency by half a frame. So for 4K it will become 34 milliseconds, but for 1080p it will be 51 milliseconds, which to be honest is a bit on the high side. In summary, the Sony XE94 is a significant upgrade over its predecessor. If you remember, last year's XD94 only had 96 dimming zones and 800 nits of peak brightness. This Sony XE94 has 256 local dimming zones, 1,285 nits of peak brightness, and also the X1 Extreme chipset, which delivers superior upscaling, not to mention Dolby Vision support following a firmware update later this year. The downsides of this TV are its slower response time and restricted viewing angles of the VA LCD panel, higher 1080p input lag, and if we really had to nitpick, its colors are not as explosively dynamic as Samsung's top-end QLED. But contrast ratio is the most important factor that contributes to picture quality, and in this aspect, the Sony XE94 or X940E delivers in spades. Ironically, the biggest threat to this TV is Sony's own 75-inch ZD9 or Z9D flagship that has more dimming zones, 648, and higher peak brightness, 1800 nits. But the ZD9 or Z9D, as it is known in the USA, is also at least £1,500 more expensive in the UK. We suspect most prospective buyers will choose to go with the XE94 and pocket the difference. So there you go. I'm just going to call it right now. Unless another TV manufacturer or even Sony themselves launch something surprising at IFA, that's the largest consumer electronics trade show in Europe that takes place in Berlin every September, this Sony XE94 is definitely the best 2017 LED LCD in terms of picture quality. I don't really consider the Sony ZD9 a 2017 model since it was released back in 2016. If you have enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the HDTV Test YouTube channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you the next time.